Ladies and gentlemen, there's some really big mistakes that you're probably making in Valorant, and before the game releases June 2nd, we need to iron out every single one of your mistakes so that you're better set up to succeed come release. So all that being said, we're going to be going over the top 5 mistakes and solutions to those mistakes. But before we get started, if you like Game Leap content, smash that sub button. But let's just jump right into it, shall we? So the first mistake that a lot of players are making is they're not correctly playing default on attack and defense. So you might be asking, what is default? What do you mean we're playing attack and defense wrong? And I'm going to break it down and tell you exactly what you need to start doing. So unless you're eco rush pushing as a team, you should be actually spreading out across the map on attack and playing default among multiple points in the map, multiple choke points. Now to clarify, default is the place that you're playing in normally right before you try to push onto objective. You know that area where all your teammates just stand around in and no one does anything? That's default. Now, you might be asking, okay, why would we spread out and not just push all together one site? Why does it matter that we spread out? What is the value to that? Well, assuming that you do not die, which is incredibly important, I'm going to get to that in a second, you just simply being there and putting in a little bit of fire and pressure on that site can accomplish one of two things. The first thing and most obvious thing is it baits out utility. How many times have you just shot, down mid somewhere and you see a sage wall, you see ice, you see fire? You can bait out so much utility just for simply existing. And at the same time, you're putting pressure on multiple sites so the enemy on defense can't consolidate on one site. Now, something important about this is no one's pushing onto site yet. You're simply just playing default and trying to bait out utility and also prevent/relay information about flanks. The thing that can really mess up a lot of attackers is when they all stack one side, right? They're trying to push through and they get delayed there. They get caught up with ice, with slows, with fire. I mean, the enemies just get to pile and pile and pile utility. And at the same time, they're sending people through your flank. So you can't rotate very easily without getting caught out. You can't push through because the enemy is just barraging you with utility. If you never play default for a certain amount of time, you're never gonna bait out this level of utility. Now, as some additional tip to bait out utility while playing default, shooting at sage walls and breaking them, wall banging corners, things like that. These are low risk ways to bait out enemy utility because a lot of times enemies will react to this with using utility and you want them to use as much as physically possible because eventually when you have advantage in the utility category, you don't have to play around all these different things when you're trying to push on a point. And it's really important that you keep track of what the enemy has. You say, hey, the sage doesn't have her wall anymore. She doesn't have any slows anymore. The Raze already used her Roomba, her paint shells. The Phoenix already used one flash. All of this is extremely important, and what default does is it uses your time as a resource to bait out utility. Now, flipping it on to the other side, as a defender, you need to be playing the balancing act of not dumping all your utility at once, but also you don't want to be run through extremely easily without using any of your utility. If you die without delaying the enemy or trading utility with the enemy or even trading kills, you've pretty much failed. And on the flip side, if you killed a single person and stopped the push, don't feel obligated to rush in for more and give up your positioning. You can simply force them away and maintain your strong defensive positioning. Now, moving on to the second mistake that happens often when players are actually planting a spike is players for some reason will just hide around the point, like all together, all grouped up. They'll all hide around the spike. First of all, they'll plant the spike in like a little cubby, and then they'll all hide right around it. This is problematic for a number of reasons. The thing that you need to actually be doing is spreading out and taking and controlling space. Controlling space does not mean chasing down kills or running down enemies. What you need to understand is that there's certain positions that give you an overwhelming advantage if you control these positions. Sideline advantage, gunfight advantage. Think about something like playing the high ground. And on top of that, if you play in incredibly obvious places near the spike, enemies can easily flush you out or cut you off with their utility, set up unfair scenarios. Because the thing is, if an enemy is coming to point, right, and there's a lot of different corridors, oftentimes that enemy will have to swing through these corridors. They will have to check each and every one of them, make sure that there's no enemies there, and often they'll use utility or pre-fire these corners. You are hiding in an incredibly obvious spot instead of contesting the advanced positioning. You can set yourself up for failure, and if the enemies control those strong positionings while you're getting swung on, you can put yourself in a no-win scenario. Let me give you this example to clarify my point. Let's say you took A on split and you planted the spike out in the open because you weren't afraid of enemies, because you killed some enemies. You planted the spike out in the open. You wanted it to be within line of sight from heaven. Then you yourself went and controlled heaven. So now you control the high ground. Now, if the enemy doesn't do his due diligence, right? If the enemy doesn't come up to the high ground and get you off the high ground, then if the enemy ever wants to defuse, you could easily peek out of heaven and take an advantage fight with him because you have the high ground and the high ground's within line of sight of the spike. Now, if the enemy has time, he can definitely contest you heaven, but it's far better for you to make him fight you there as opposed to him being able to take space for free. This is extremely important for you to get right. It's all about controlling strong positionings on the map and fighting for those positions in order to give yourself an advantage in the gunfights. On top of this, please make sure if you have an overwhelming advantage against your enemies, let's say you're something like 3v1, do not let that guy take consecutive 1v1 gunfights. You should be swinging through and always trading out kills. Now, moving on to the third mistake, and this is something that's actually pretty important, is try to hone in on a smaller hero pool. What do I mean by that? A smaller hero pool. Well, the thing is, a lot of these characters have specific nuances to them and expertise that you can learn. Think all the Silver Arrow bounce spots, the Cypher camera spots, the Sage slow wall bounces, the Phoenix flashes. There's so many different things for every single hero that through trial and error, you're getting constantly better at. While we 100% know you can't one-trick a character, someone could just take your character, and I wouldn't suggest trying to one-trick a character at all. You should try not to play every single character in the entire game. Try to play about 3 characters and learn everything you can about just those 3 characters and have them fit into a multitude of different scenarios. Maybe you have one engager, like a Phoenix or a Breach. Maybe you have one utility, like a Sage or a Brimstone. Maybe you have one information gatherer, like a Cypher or a Sova. Then you just grind those 3, you learn all the nitty-gritty niche scenario things for these characters so that they're fully integrated into your playstyle. You don't have to think about them in-game, and you're not kind of bumbling around, not getting the maximum impact out of your abilities. And lastly, on top of this, you need to be understanding the role of the characters you're playing. Every single character can't be playing the same way. Just because you play an extremely aggressive playstyle on Phoenix, which was probably correct, doesn't mean you could play a really aggressive playstyle on Sage. In fact, that might be counterproductive, and you could be throwing the game. Just basically copy and pasting your playstyle to every character you play is not the way to succeed. Now we're going to move on to some tips in order to help you iron out all your mistakes, not just the ones above, but even more of them. The fourth thing that you could 100% do is analyze pro players and streamers and learn their habits. Here's what I would suggest you do. Every single time you sit down and watch a pro or a streamer play, try and learn one thing, just one thing that they're doing. If you're watching a streamer for 2-3 hours, there's no reason that you can't at least learn one thing and try to apply it in your games. Maybe it was a really cool Sonic spot or some Viper nades sticking on the ceiling or something like that. Watch what they did, go to a training room before your game, and try to actually learn it. Make it become part of your strategy. Or maybe it was just a simple decision. No matter what it is, just try to use your watch time as a potential learning opportunity as well, and this will help you improve much quicker. Now, I'm not going to include every single streamer or pro, but if you want to know my suggestions for some streamers you should watch, Hiko, Mendo, Defran, when he gets unbanned, Asu, Brax, Scream, there's so many different ones. Just here's what I would suggest. Try to watch players who are known for being extremely good at the game, not for being necessarily entertaining if you want to incorporate this strategy. Now for the fifth and final tip, and this is the way that you can 100% improve, that you can 100% iron out your mistakes and get better as a player. You need to be recording your own gameplay and watching your own gameplay. Now, this is a really huge one, and it might seem like a tedious step, but I have literally, in all my time of coaching throughout multiple games, I have literally never found a player that does this regularly that cannot improve in a game. It is by far the easiest way to correct your own mistakes, because while watching guides and videos like this can be very useful for learning things and can be a tool to learn, your specific mistakes are exactly that, specific to you. The only way to find these mistakes is either one of two ways. One, getting a VOD review, which usually costs money or some sort of time charity, and often they're of mixed quality, I'm not gonna lie. But the second way is not only free, but in my opinion might even be better in some scenarios, is the self-VOD review. Record your own gameplay, watch it back, take notes, and look out for repetitive mistakes, lost fights that were your fault, or failed plays. Then create a hypothesis for correction, apply what you've learned in your next games or your next day's worth of games, and then rinse and repeat the process. I guarantee you it's a 100% method to fix and iron out your mistakes, help you rank up, and prepare you for Valorant release June 2nd. Anyways, if you like Valorant, want to improve, or want to get caught up on any Valorant news, do me a huge solid, smash that sub button. But that's all we got for you today. I'm Coach Mills, and until next time.